70s, 80s, and more. Ocean 100. Hey, it's Corey, and I have a true honor. I have special guest Richard Marx on the show today. And before we listen to some of the music and talk about his show next Friday at the Delta in support of the Autism Society here on Prince Edward Island and in honor of David Carver Music's 30th anniversary, Richard, I wanted to first ask about the first song you wrote, and I know it was to impress a girl when you were 14 because you shared it on your social media.
Yeah, like almost every other guy in rock and roll.
Yeah. Do you remember the song at all?
I do. I don't really remember it musically, but it was something like "I'm the one you need," or like because this girl, gosh, she was gorgeous, and I actually still see her sometimes.
Is that right?
She's one of the only people from my early school days that I still have any interaction with. But she was always hanging with a guy that I would be like, really, him? And so I sort of and I was shy, so I didn't, and I felt like I didn't really have game just as a dude. But I knew that I could write a song that would do that work for me. So I thought, and I used to watch Elvis movies, so I thought, okay, well, it's always the same plot. The girl isn't interested in Elvis, and then Elvis sings her a song, and then all of a sudden she's all into Elvis, forgetting that Elvis was also like the most handsome man who ever lived. So it didn't really work out for me the same way.
Now, when you were 14 and you did that song, were you heavily involved in music then? Did you know that was going to be your calling?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I started singing actually professionally when I was 5 on TV and radio commercials, because that's the business my parents were in. My dad wrote and arranged and produced jingles for many, many years and was really successful in that world. And my mom sang on a bunch of the jingles. And so when I was a little kid, just singing around the house, I guess they realized that I could sing in tune even as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old. So they started, bringing me into the studio, and I would sing on breakfast cereal commercials and candy bar commercials and peanut butter commercials and stuff. And so I did a bunch of, I had a lot of studio experience growing up as a singer, but I didn't really start writing songs until I had a crush on Lynn Harwich when I was 14.
I want to talk about when you started sending out demos, and we could talk about Lionel Richie and how that connection happened, but did you ever have a discouraged day where you're like, maybe this isn't for me? Oh,
I had hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really complain because the facts are the facts, which is that I had my first hit at 23, so I can't exactly complain about, that I, just slaved away and toiled for years and didn't know. But there were, I started really actively pursuing a record deal and a career when I was 17 or 18. So for 5 years, I was rejected by every label, and I was told, look, this is something that's, we've all talked, that he and I have talked about. David Foster told me I shouldn't sing.
Wow.
I started working with him when I was about 19 or 20, and he gave me a great opportunity to sort of be around him in the studio, and we wrote some songs together, and I sang background vocals on a bunch of stuff for him. But he knew that I was pursuing a career as an artist, and we did become really good friends back then for a little while. And one day I mentioned something about it, and he said, dude, I got to tell you the truth. You're a really good songwriter, and you're going to end up being a great producer, but you're not a singer. You should not sing. And so he tells that story even now, about, even somebody like him gets it wrong sometimes.
I remember my first cassette single way back was Satisfied, and I went and bought it with my allowance because I saw it on a David Copperfield TV special.
Wow. Okay, so here's a really great story. That's first of all, that's awesome. Second of all, David Copperfield, as he would do back then, he would do these incredible TV specials. And I was on the road, touring, so I didn't see it, but a bunch of people called me and said, oh, we heard Satisfied on this David Copperfield special last night. And I thought, really? Because I didn't give permission for that. And so my managers got in touch with him, and we ended up threatening to sue him.
Oh, man.
Because he used the song without permission.
Yeah.
And so I got him to make a donation to a charity in my name as opposed to suing him. Cut to, I end up meeting him about a year or two later, and he's been one of my dearest friends ever since. But we met through me threatening to sue him, which is hilarious.
Oh man, that is
and
wild.
He's the greatest guy, and we've been friends for 30 years. So it's just so weird. Every once in a while, we'll be hanging out, we'll be at dinner, and he'll go, "Just remember, man, it all started with you threatening to sue me."
Wow. 70s, 80s, and more. Ocean 100, and featuring music and conversation with Richard Marx. When you're writing songs and then you put them out in that public domain and asks you for your permission, and you're like, "I'm not sure I want it on that project," is that something that's freeing to be able to say no?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's very rare that I've said no. I mean, unless it's representing something that I'm really against. I've been back in the day before cigarette commercials were banned or tobacco commercials were banned. There were quite a few requests to use different songs of mine, Satisfied being one of them. I would never, ever lend my songs or name to anything like that. But for the most part, it's been pretty cool. And in the case of, what people do sometimes is they hope that you won't know that they've used your song without permission. And there's ways around it, I guess, but at the end of the day, you're taking something that belongs to somebody else. And so most people, especially in the last 20 years, they cross the T's and dot the I's pretty well.
Yeah, I'm amazed. I started in radio when I was 12, which was back in 1989. Wow. I had the love of music and the bug then, and knew I wanted to have a career in radio. And to watch it evolve as a business and see how it's changed, from that cassette single and before that vinyl and then CDs and now digital downloads. As an artist and a songwriter, what's it like to navigate the changes of your career since the start to now?
That's a very good question. It's a little hard to answer it briefly, so just bear with me. But the first thing, the way you even pose the question is interesting, because I was talking about this to somebody the other day. When I was a kid, music was represented physically in a 12-inch disc. So, and 7-inch disc, of course. Buying a 45, but mostly I bought albums, and I borrowed albums from my friends, and so music to me was represented by a 12-inch disc. And then CDs came along, and then it became that. And then over time, it is invisible. It's something that you can't see. And that is really interesting to me, because I also think that as that has happened, so has the value, the intellectual value of music to the consumer. If you can't really see it, then really how much value does it have? And that's why I think it became so easy for people to just sort of take it and illegally download it and steal it, because it didn't really represent a physical thing anymore. Obviously, that's changed a little bit with streaming and with the laws that have been put in place. But it is interesting to me as a creator of music that journey has been a little disheartening over time. Now, that said, again, almost like when I talk about, struggling in the early days, which, having success so young, I am grateful for that. Just like I'm really grateful that I got to have a really good ride on the charts, on tour, selling a lot of records, ticking off all my bucket list goals, every single one of them. So when I, not complain, but when I talk about what I feel is unfortunate in the music business, I'm not talking about me. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm still touring all the time. I have a catalog of music that I can play for as long as I'm breathing and as long as I can, physically do it. I'm sad for the up-and-coming generation of people who want to make music, including my own sons, who are incredibly talented, but don't have the opportunities that I had. The industry is a shadow of its former self, and that's a bummer. So I don't necessarily at this point see the toothpaste going back in the tube. I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, especially with the competition for people's attention it seems to increase every day, and there's just so much content and there's so much out there. It's a little disheartening. But again, it's not personal for me, because I feel really lucky. The one thing I do miss, to be honest with you, I miss the sort of constant desire to write, record, and release new music. that has, like many of my contemporaries, that has become a thing that we just sort of either don't do anymore or we put really on the back burner, because our livelihoods and our careers are really based upon touring and doing shows and playing the songs that we've written that people know.
Yeah.
And the idea, but there's nothing like writing a new song, recording it, and feeling like, oh man, a couple million people are going to hear this. Well, now you don't know who's going to hear it. And it is a little bit of a demotivator. That said, it's in my blood, so I'm always writing new songs and I'm always recording, and I'm going to put out a bunch of new music this year. But the expectation that it's going to be anything other than a blip on the radar, barely, is non-existent, which is okay. I just feel like for myself, I have to keep writing new songs. I have to keep recording. I have to keep current. I have to keep, putting stuff out there for my own health.
'70s, '80s, and more. Ocean 100 featuring conversation and music with Richard Marx. Friday night at the Delta. He'll be doing a very special gala celebration in support of David Carver's 30th anniversary in music. I loved the other day on one of your feeds. There's always a story to tell if you're a storyteller.
Yeah, there's always something to write. There's always something to say. Absolutely. But I really kind of put that stuff out there more as an encouragement to young songwriters who might be wondering what's the point. And there's always a point. There's always something to say, So this whole idea, and that's also, people that talk about writer's block, which I don't really think exists. I think that's just a thing your brain makes up to let you be lazy.
Kind of justify it.
Yeah.
Is there any particular formula when you're writing a song? Do you start with a melody or just start with a thought, or is it different every time?
It's different a lot, but I mean, the majority of the songs that I've written and continue to write all start with a musical idea in my head. It's hardly ever intentional. It's not like I say, I'm going to go try to write a piece of music and go grab a guitar or sit at the piano. It never happens that way, and it hasn't for decades. It's that I'm in my car, or I'm at dinner with my wife, or I'm on a hike, and I hear a whole piece of music in my head. And sometimes it's a whole song with lyrics too, but usually it's just a piece of music. But it's very fleshed out. When I even my initial thought of something it's not a linear series of notes. It's a whole production. I can hear the drums, I can hear the bass, I can hear the record in my head. Wow. It just doesn't have lyrics yet, And so then my job is to, flesh that out in my head and then go to an instrument and figure out what the chords are and then translate it either through technology on a laptop with a bunch of synths, or my favorite thing to do, which is to sit in a room with 3 other musicians and teach them what's in my head, and we create it. Like that feeling, Corey, of, I was telling, again, it's something I said the other day. To this day, as many records as I've made, the sensation of hearing something that I made up in my head through the speakers the first time is the closest thing to sex I've ever experienced. It's just it's goosebumps, and it's amazing, and I'm addicted to it, and I'll never not want to have that experience again and again and again and again, like sex.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask what it's like when fans share an intimate story about, we were together and Right Here Waiting was the song that played, and they tell you probably way more than you ever needed to know about their personal life, but as a fan of your music, what's that like to hear someone share? And it could be a heartbreaking story, it could be, a love of 60 years.
Look, I like hearing all of it. It's when people come up and share their stories about, their experiences with something that I wrote, it's humbling. It's really, it's a privilege. The fact that, that I've written something for my own selfish purposes that is a piece of a soundtrack to someone else's life is really amazing. And I love all the cute stories, or I love hearing the stories about, I have guys that come up to me and go, man, I put this song on and I got lucky that night, or I put this song, I played the song for my girlfriend and then I asked her to marry me. And but it's the stories of loss that hit me the hardest. I've had so many widows of soldiers and widowers of female soldiers that have told me that Right Here Waiting was their song, or songs that I've written about separation, about heartbreak, about loss. When people tell me those stories, it's really powerful and it's humbling, and I'm always really appreciative. And I know it's not easy for somebody to come up to me and tell me those stories, so I appreciate it that much more.
'70s, '80s, and more. Ocean 100. I'm Corey. Special guest is Richard Marx. We're talking about life and music. I'm excited for the show. You'll be here to celebrate David Carver's 30th anniversary in the concert business.
Yeah.
My operations manager this morning, when I said, I'm going to be talking to Richard Marx tonight, he's like, tell him I saw him in Fredericton with Wilson Phillips.
Yeah, they sure did. Yeah, Wilson Phillips opened for me on tour, I guess in 1990, when their record became huge. And then I didn't see any of them for decades, and then I just saw them a few months ago at a benefit for the Santa Barbara Firefighters Foundation. It was a celebration of the firefighters that helped, tried to help everybody in Santa Barbara. There was a really great outdoor concert, and Wilson Phillips was there. It was like old home week. It was great to see them.
Oh, man. The show that you're doing here in Prince Edward Island is in support of autism. You have a bunch of charities that you help out with. That must be another piece of the career and what Stardom does, where you can give back in little ways and big ways and just be able to help everyone on earth be a little happier.
Yeah, I mean, it started for me for the very first single, maybe even, or maybe I was on the second single of the first album. I should have known better. When people started to reach out and invite me to charity events or ask me to play at charity events, and I've met the most extraordinary people, and I am involved with a lot of charity organizations, and in a lot of ways that no one knows about, obviously, not just the ones where I show up and do a concert, but there are people, there are organizations that I'm personally involved with on a regular basis, and I just meet extraordinary people through doing events and being involved with different charities, and believe me, I get more out of it than anybody else. I feel grateful that people ask, and I'm always happy when somebody says, "Hey, are you interested in helping out?" With something, because I know it's going to be a great experience for me too.
I know from reading your social media feeds, you believe in karma. Do you have any superstitions?
Not really.
No.
No, not really. The only thing, it's not superstitions, it's just fact. One thing I've learned, especially in the last 5 years, I'd say, is that the power of your thinking is everything. And I stumbled upon this book a few years ago called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It was written in the turn of the century, in the early 1900s. And it was, I was never really a big fan of The Secret. No disrespect to people that got something out of it. And if you got something out of it, great. For me, it was just a little like, if I just think I want a bike, I'll get a bike. No. But what was good about it, which is really what this book, As a Man Thinketh, explored way before anybody else was talking about it, is that whatever you think is what will be. Your thoughts are the path to your destiny. So if you think negative things are going to happen. And I've experienced it my whole life on both sides. And I've trained myself as best as I can to always be very, very careful about what I'm thinking and how I think. So that's this close to superstition. It's not superstition. It's just a practice of mindfulness, and to me, that's everything.
Tickets for the gala still available. Tickets for the show only as well. All the details at ocean100.com. An intimate evening with Richard Marx here in Charlottetown. Richard, thank you for this time talking about your music and your life, and safe travels. We'll see you on Prince Edward Island next week.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's such a beautiful place, and it's going to be, hopefully the weather will be great, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, sunshine is out every day here now, and things are warming up. It's going to be fantastic. Richard Marx, this has been a true honor. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain and talk about life.
My pleasure, man. I enjoyed it.
We'll see you in town next week.
All right, buddy. Take care.